Hello everybody, how's it going, and welcome back to the As Always podcast. This is episode 170. I'm one of your hosts, James, and I'm joined as always by Tyler.
As always, how's it going, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's weird to be here. Is it weird? It's been a while since, like, I've got my setup here. I'm doing a podcast from my living room. It feels like it's been a long while since I've done one. The last time we talked on a podcast was in person. So
yeah,
I don't know. It just feels like it's been a long while.
That's true.
Weird.
That is true. And we didn't do an As Always in person. Obviously, people are gonna be watching this. Probably a few people expecting it, like this is gonna be the in person one, right? But we didn't. We didn't do one.
We didn't do one.
We prioritized 4 Pillars Podcast and Clubhouse, which goes to show how we feel about this show. But that's all right. Don't go anywhere. All right, stick with us.
Yeah. Well, we have things to talk about on this show. And I mean, we have specific topics. Obviously, we're going to do a spoiler cast of the full season 1 of House of the Dragon. This episode is a full spoilers for the Lord of the Rings of Power show. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it or don't.
Or maybe don't.
Or maybe don't. And we're going to go full spoilers, but there are some things we'll discuss beforehand. So if you haven't seen the last 4 Pillars podcast that's out, I'd recommend watching that. We'll get into why that is in a moment. But of course, while we're here, we've got to thank the great people at patreon.com/AsAlways for making this show happen. We appreciate the fuck out of them. Our producers, that's Baron Keen, Damien, then also Orange Gnome, Farentino, Flash Powder, King Richard III, Ryan Hafer, and Bullseye47. Thanks to Sweet Vintage for power this podcast. James, on the last episode of the 4 Pillars, well, let's start with this. You were just saying we didn't do an As Always podcast in person, and I think the big thing with this show, for me, that it's felt like, when we started it, it was the Kill Connor Club podcast originally. It was an Assassin's Creed podcast, for the most part. 2 friends, plus guests sometimes, mostly talking about Assassin's Creed among random stories, funny laughs, other video games, all that sort of shit. It's developed over the years to be a bit of a video game news show where we discuss topics each and every episode, ranging from video games, movies, television shows. We've done plenty of spoiler casts throughout. We had the Cinema and podcast that was sort of an offshoot of it to just be spoiler casts. Then we sort of brought it back to be into this show as it is now. Today's a spoilercast episode. But I think the thing over the years that sort of drifted apart for us is our interests aren't the same. We both loved video games. We both loved TV shows. We both loved movies. And we still do to some degree. But obviously, you've gone your way doing your thing. And for me, I've definitely gone a different way. And I think we keep doing this because we're great mates and we love chatting each and every week. But I think it just got to the point where specifically this show, more than the other 2 shows we do, being Clubhouse and 4 Pillars podcast, where it's like, what's the purpose of this show anymore? Yeah. And we talked about on the 4 Pillars podcast that at the end of the year, I planned, this is probably at the start of this year, that this would be my last year doing any of the shows. As I just felt like it was my time to move on for various reasons. Again, go to the 4 Pillars podcast. We talk about that in great detail. And I think a big thing for me, this is the first show in my head. I was like, I just don't... We used to have goals. We used to have all these things we wanted for it. And this show specifically was the biggest show we've done. It's the longest running podcast. We've done it for over 8 years. We've done over 170 episodes of it, plus so many other offshoots, special episodes, things like that. We've done hundreds and hundreds of podcasts together. This show in 2020 was the peak. It was fucking huge. I couldn't believe the views we were getting and the listens we were getting. Like, it was pretty unbelievable. And I think we went through personal things in 2021. We went through, a change in what we're interested in, and we sort of got to the end of what we wanted to talk about and what we shared in terms of this show. How do you feel about, where this has sort of gone?
No, yeah, I agree. And like we've always said, whenever we bring something up, usually the other person feels pretty similar, even if it's just for different reasons, whenever we've made some sort of choice or decision with the show. And I think this was, a similar thing. Because we didn't just like bring up one day, oh, we should end the show maybe, and then the other one was like, yeah, let's do that. We just sort of like were talking about, I guess, how we feel about the show and like what we want to do and things, and it sort of developed, and we both sort of came to the conclusion like it's, it makes sense. And I have felt this way for a while, mainly about As Always more than anything. But I think if I'm ending, if we're stepping away from As Always, it also it would feel wrong to continue everything else we do too. And I think As Always for a while has felt like, the fun part is just having a chat. Once we start talking about topics, it's like there's no conversation there anymore. You know what I mean? Like, if we're talking about video games, you don't really have a take. If we're talking about like the MCU or whatever, like it would just be me being overly cynical, and it would just get like, there was no conversation anymore about the topics we used to talk about. And it just means there's no longevity for a show, because it just doesn't work like that. It doesn't feel like something that, is worth doing or something we're invested in. And I think we had a good run with As Always podcast, and I think the reason why then it makes sense to also step away from Four Pillars, at least for me, is because I think As Always did run its course, and we've kind of seen what happens when you get to a point where you don't want to do it anymore. And I obviously don't want that to happen with, Four Pillars and everything. So it makes sense to...
I don't think it would ever happen at Clubhouse. It's just that good of a show.
Yeah.
It really is that good of a show.
Yeah, true. Clubhouse is the one. It's good fun. And that really comes down to the fact that there are no preset... Like, it's not a genre, really. It's just... We just sit down and talk.
And that show's evolves.
And it's just
and
fun.
Changes.
Yeah.
And it's designed to evolve. Like,
exactly.
We designed it to evolve and be... It's the people's podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think for me, I knew this was the one, like you said, that stood out as it's run its course, and it's hard to accept because this has been the big show. This has been the staple. This has been the mothership. This has been the true north for my content creation career online for so long, and it's got such a storied history. Mm-hmm. And there would be no Four Pillars without this show. There would be no Clubhouse without this show. There'd be none of a lot of things. There'd be no community. There'd be no Four Pillars community. This was the beginning. This was when I think about the beginning of the Four Pillars, I think the first thing that ever happened was you and I collabed together.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think of. And it was that first As Always podcast at the time, Kill Connor Club. Well, at the time it was just a fucking live stream. Wasn't anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the 30th of August, 2014.
That's so long ago.
That was over 8 years ago. And as well, I think when we started it was two individual creators that are friends, and we built our friendship together throughout these years of doing the shows together. And I think as well, and something I brought up when I was in person, is I'm so glad I waited to really have the discussion, especially with like George and Ethan, about it until I was in person with you guys. Mm-hmm. Because I just knew, I'm so far away. It's been a lot of years since we've seen each other because of COVID. It's been a hard couple of years. If I was to say I'm leaving the shows, but I want to do it at the end of the year, I feel like it would sort of dwindle down. We'd stop showing up, and it would just end in a bit of a, like, we just move on and forget about it. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we did it in person, we spent a week together, it was what I hoped it would be, which is it reminded us of, like, we are friends first before we're business partners, co-hosts of a show, anything like that. And I think maybe even more importantly for you and I, because we do so many shows together, and I think we've built more pressure together of doing more shows and running a business together for so many years. And the thing about you and I is we've never had like a real disagreement ever.
Yeah.
Like behind the scenes, like people will be like, we have never really had any disagreements. We've always been able to compromise really well. We've always been on the same page with decisions. And even when we have disagreed, it's never become like, we don't have egos with each other. It's sort of like, you'll be like, okay, fair enough. Or I'll go, yeah, fair enough, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Because we have that respect for each other.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was always like, if we had a disagreement, there was always one of us that, like, I guess cared about it more. Like, if it was something you really cared about doing, I was like, yeah, well,
I think we could always tell.
Yeah.
We could always tell who cared.
And it was because it didn't happen often. So when it did happen, it was kind of like, yeah, okay, you clearly really want to do this. We'll do it that way. Because it's, it's whatever. And it just kind of works. And I think that's what made the whole thing work. because like you said, we did build, our entire friendship through these podcasts really in the early days. And so it just kind of it just naturally evolved, everything worked, and now we've just naturally reached that stepping off point for it. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you look at some of the AsAlways podcasts from the past few weeks, like the past year, and you'll kind of see the lack of direction and content. Like, we just didn't know what we were getting out of it anymore and what we were doing. Because it used to be we'd have a laugh, but there'd be some really good discussions in there. We've had some good episodes this year. The Obi-Wan one was really good. And other ones that I can't remember. But it's...
I feel like us talking about House of the Dragon's been fun. I've enjoyed that.
Yeah. And it's, we've had some good episodes, but I think overall you can see this lack of... We don't know what it is anymore. We don't know what we're doing, really. It's kind of we'll talk about the news and stuff, and there's been some discussions, but then you compare it to Four Pillars podcast that's consistently been really strong, every single time.
Really
and
good.
It's really good. As we're stepping away from AsAlways, it makes sense to also step away from Four Pillars, at least in terms of, in a business sense and everything. Like we said on Four Pillars, it's not going to disappear forever. But it's not going to be anywhere near as consistent. It's not going to be a business. It's just going to be...
Because I think that's been the thing, and not that it's ever been a lot of pressure for you and I, like we were just saying. We've always worked really well together. Mm-hmm. But I think when we work with other people, including Ethan and George, and extend a big community, a lot of other content creators, we do a lot of work with other people. I think that also builds pressure on you and I. Mm-hmm. And I think it sort of became, as you and I lost our focus on the shows and we're doing our own things, me with my career and my life, and you with your career and your life, I think that we had some negative feelings towards the shows, specifically maybe this show more than others, as I've said. And I think that was affecting your relationship and my relationship together, in the sense of we've never had a fight or anything, but it was just sort of we were drifting away from our shows, and therefore, in some ways, it felt like, to me, our friendship. And I just wanted to get back to be let's fuck off the shows and just be friends first. And it was really nice being with you in person and re-establishing that, where I'm sweet, we're these shows can end. You and I are always going to be good.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to talk to you and see you for a long, long, long time. Mm-hmm. We've built too much of a real bond and a friendship. You're one of the most important people in my life and have been for such a fucking long time.
Yeah, same for you, man.
It'd just break my heart if we didn't end this way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm actually was so relieved at the end of the trip to leave and be we've decided we're ending the shows, the network, all these sorts of things. I'm walking away. I want to do my thing, but I'm I've never felt stronger in terms of my friendships with you boys.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm that's the best way to end anything, because I know it's going to upset a lot of listeners, and there's a lot of people that still care so much about these shows and about us, and we're not disappearing, and our connections, our friendships isn't over. We'll have reunions, we'll have specials, we'll have charity events, we'll do stuff together. That's not going to end. That's the beautiful part of it. Whereas like any great television show, I feel that the great sitcoms that run for seasons and years and years and years, eventually they end. But if it's always nice years later where they can do the sort of reunions, the nice things, where it's they're actually all friends, behind the scenes. Whereas I never wanted our shows to be, they end bad, we drift apart, none of us are friends, and it just sort of is this bitter thing. How many things on YouTube or online happen that way?
Yeah,
and it sucks as a fan of it. Mm-hmm. I'd rather, if you're a listener, if you're a fan of what we've done all these years, this is the best case scenario to wrap up, where we all fucking have nothing but love for each other, and there'll be times where you get to have the nostalgia trip and we get to have the nostalgia trip of coming back together and doing content together, because we're all really still friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way for it to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I said this on the Four Pillars podcast, but it really is similar-ish, although different because we're all in different parts of the world, but similar to the way me and George ended up with Horsey and Fox, in that it's not a thing we do 3 times a week anymore. We might only do it once a year, but it's still there and it still happens. And when we do it, everyone can get together and you get that nostalgia of, it's like the old days, and it's just a bit of fun. And we'll still come together for Four Pillars podcasts every, who knows? It doesn't matter, but it'll, there will be an episode, there'll be a show. We'll chat to each other. We'll do charity events, like Tyler said. And all of those things. So there will always be some sort of something to get, because we're always going to be friends. And just by the nature of how we make content, that's just sort of how it works. But it's just not that consistent business model anymore, because it just doesn't feel right. Like it's just not I guess the way we want to go with it anymore, and it just doesn't make any sense, and it feels like that right point to just jump off and goes in a different direction in terms of our careers and our lives and all of that stuff. But we're always going to be friends, and that connection will always be there, and there will always be some content to dip your toes back into. So it's good. That's all in all, I think.
100%. I mean, I'm going to be spending fucking Christmas with you next year, mate.
Oh, hell yeah.
I can't fucking wait. I'm coming back to the UK next Christmas. I get my first fucking cold Christmas.
It better snow.
Had to break the news to my mother about that, because they're building a fucking new house and shit, and that'll be done by next Christmas. And I said, just so you know, Mum, this is what I'm doing. She's like, you go the Christmas after? I'm like, that's not the point. The point is I want to see them soon. That's why it's next Christmas and not the one after. Mm-hmm. It's not about the Christmas thing. It's just when's the next time that makes the most sense, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And she just rolled her eyes and didn't talk to me for an hour. No, she was sweet, but that was the only conversation. She's like, oh god, I'm gonna have to fucking tell my mother that I won't be there for Christmas, and she'll fucking blow a fucking gasket.
Classic.
Yeah, man, it's the right time, and there'll still be a few more episodes left. We'll finish out the year of the AsAlways podcast and the Four Pillars podcast and the Clubhouse podcast, and we'll talk on Patreon about what we're going to do with that, and talk to the community that's there about it and what they want to see from it.
For sure.
Because, I think for me, I'm the one that's like, I'm just stepping away from everything. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm still going to, be there, like we're all friends and stuff, but in terms of, I can't do this late night podcast anymore. I can't do it. I'm in bed by 9:30 these days. Yeah. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning. Like, this is just like, it's getting, I don't have it in me. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, again, Four Pillars podcast, I feel like I explained it way better, than I'm doing now, but it's just I have nothing but such great memories of these shows, and there's been some hard times with the community, with the shows, with everything, but it's mostly been just fucking awesome. The guests we've had, the friends we've made, the different eras of this show, like, it's been going for so long.
Yeah,
so fucking long.
True.
I was 18 years old the first podcast we did together, James. I'm 27 years old right now. Like, it's been so long that we've been doing this, and I've had a blast. And we'll do this Rings of Power spoilercast today. We'll talk House of the Dragon. The next AsAlways podcast, there'll be a couple more, and I feel like for the last show, you and I will just have a nostalgia trip down memory lane, and we'll do the AsAlways awards. But I reckon it should be different. It should be like all AsAlways community related stuff that we can look back on our history and just fucking laugh about it.
Yeah.
I think would be a nice way.
It's going to be so weird to do a final one. It's going to be weird because if it's like, it's this is what we want to do, and like it makes sense, and like we know we're going to wrap it up at the end of the year, but it's going to feel weird to do that final podcast and it
I'll
be
cry
over
so hard. It's not like it's not like we don't care about it. That's the hard part. Like, I care so much about these shows. I just know it's the right decision to do this, even though it's like sucks as well. So don't think like for listeners that like we're like, oh, fuck this show off. We wouldn't be finishing out the year if we hated it.
No, we would just wrap up and we would just not talk to each other ever again.
Yeah. But it's just not the case.
But yeah, and it's like with anything else I've done on my channel too. People like were like, oh, what happened to like the when I stopped doing song parodies for new AC games or whatever, or when we didn't do another 24-hour stream, or just there's certain eras and there's certain things, and you know when to move on and do different stuff. And it's like, those things were good. Like, it was always fun making a parody for a new AC or, you know, a new game, whatever it was with Luke. That was always fun. And the 24-hour streams were always fun. And the As Always podcast, Kill Connor Club, was always fun. But sometimes you gotta know when it's time to let it go and move on, and you know, just then you can remember it fondly. Like Ethan said about Four Pillars. So yeah.
Well, that's what I want. That's what I want for our audience to. You know, we try to think about it from your perspective, and I certainly tried to think that what would I want if I was a listener of our shows, and I just want it to be fond memories. Of laughs, of good times. And like you said, we'll be back doing other things. It just won't be as frequent. It won't be a business. It'll just be friends having fun. So yeah, that's I guess our other explanation of it but just for you and I and this show. I felt like it deserved its own thing.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously next Clubhouse we'll talk about Patreon. We'll get some input from everybody about, you know, what everybody wants to, you know, what we'll do. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully everybody's on the same page and feels good and positive and happy.
People are gonna be sad, bro.
Yeah,
people are gonna be sad.
Are they gonna be as sad as when we launched a Patreon for just $1 a month for extra content? Because that was a whole thing on stream.
I guess people were a bit upset for a couple of weeks. And then we delivered the greatest podcast that's ever hit the internet, and people really shut the fuck up about it then.
True.
They were throwing money at us for a while.
True. And
they stopped.
To be fair, that's the point. If you've never pledged to As Always and you're sad that we're going away, our catalogue of clubhouses will exist. So if you want to throw us $1, go ahead. And you could just listen to one podcast a fortnight. And it'll feel like we never left. That's a good
question. Like, what happens? Like, we'll talk about it on Patreon.
Yeah,
but like, there's definitely I've had a lot of thoughts about how the fuck that's gonna work with like the catalog of Clubhouse.
Yeah. We'll just leave it, right?
Yeah, but it's weird.
Or do you want to like put it? Because then if people don't want to pledge anymore, they won't have access to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Do we make it public?
We can't take money from people when we're not doing anything.
True. Yeah. Do we just make it public?
No, we can't make it public, bruh. No way, dude. No way is that shit public?
Especially not those 2017 episodes. I don't know what I said in those.
I don't know what. There's no way. There's but also for like other people's topics, there's some personal.
Oh, true. Yeah, they could never be.
You know what I mean?
They could never ever
we
be
could
public.
literally never make it public.
Yeah,
so that's my point. What do we do with the catalog?
Do
we make a Google Drive, put them all in there, and then like just send the link to the people that are patrons, and then be like, it's up to you, figure it out, fuckface.
Maybe. I suppose it depends what we do with the Patreon.
That's true. That's a good point.
But
we'll discuss it on Patreon. So
we will.
Head over there if you want.
Head over to Patreon. Just you know. How many more episodes do we have left of As Always? Is it 5?
I don't know.
Is it 5? Are we gonna end on 175 or are we gonna end on 174? If we end on 174, I'm gonna cry. That's not a good number. I need a round number.
I do like the idea of 175.
I think we've only got 5 including this one though. Unless we want to do an extra
We're doing back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I counted that one.
Oh, you counted that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Unless we want to go into like, because I just assumed we'd stop. The last one we'd do would be like the second week of December, but we could do I don't know.
I mean, we could go all the way to make it 175, I guess. You know, I feel like it makes sense. But also, it's not like we've done 175 episodes of this. We've done about 3,000 of them.
Yeah, true.
The unnumbered episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure, we could do that. And technically, episode 0 as well. So technically, there is 175 episodes. If we do 175, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I don't know. I don't really want to think about it.
Oh no.
Yeah. Anyway, this isn't going to be the longest spoiler cast of all time, I feel like. Mainly because I don't
Imagine
want
if
it to
it
be.
was the longest spoiler cast of all time.
I don't want it to be. Mostly because I want to go to bed, James.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, well, I mean, first things first, the Lord of the Rings show was bad. And that's it. We can wrap it up. No more needs to be said.
Yeah.
Go to bed.
Look, again, spoilers for the Rings of Power.
Yes.
I'll say a
Spoiler
quick
warning.
piece.
Okay.
I loved the first 2 episodes of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those who don't know, if you don't know for some fucking reason, I'm a massive fucking Lord of the Rings Tolkien fan. Book fan, extended universe, like, massive fan, and expectations and standards for what this show needed to be. Not just as its own TV show, but also in terms of what it does for Tolkien lore. And I'm also such a massive fan of the Lord of the Rings films. I get the need to change things also. I totally respect that. But there's also a level. There's got to be a real valid reason to change lore and to fit a show canon. And at the very least, even just to fit into, if you want to be the screen canon, to fit into, link into the movies. Because the point of this show was to be a prequel to the movies. That's why they didn't try to remake Lord of the Rings with the Lord of the Rings rights. So like, let's make a second age show, the Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, that'll set up what leads to the events of the Lord of the Rings. That's the point of the show. So at the very least, you've got to link to the show and not fuck that up. Now, my problem with where this show went is not only did it shit directly in the mouth of Tolkien and Tolkien canon, it also farted in the face of the movies on several occasions, which we'll talk about. But I loved it at first. I thought it was clever. I thought it had great setup. The world felt great. The quality of the production's outstanding. The soundtrack to the show is phenomenal. And I thought most of the actors are fantastic. It wasn't performance-based. It was directorial. I don't know.
Maybe.
It was the directing. That I thought was the big issue, and the editing. That last episode had some terrible edits. In terms of like pacing. It felt like they'd skip scenes because they'd filmed too much and they had to fit it into an hour and 10 minutes in an episode. Like there were lots of times where I'm like, we're skipping over shit. And I get what's happening, but it just it just feels jarring.
Yeah.
And I don't get why this character's switched their emotions and feelings so fast. Like, there's been a scene in between we haven't seen. Like, there's so many of those.
It comes across as like
moments.
the writer knows what they're doing, so they just do it, and then as you're watching, you're like, but why? Like, everyone just feels slightly different. It's odd
for no reasoning behind it, and that's where the show, I felt like episode to episode just got worse and worse. Episode 4 was the worst episode. And I only mean that because I thought the first 2 were really strong and were solid. Like, I loved what it showed with like Tolkien lore and book backstory, and it didn't fuck with any of that. Well, not too much. All reasonable stuff. All stuff that I thought was reasonable to make a show work. I was like, yep, fine, I get it. We've got to change some things to fit a show. And then episode 4 is where it changed from... It wasn't even that it fucked with canon more than anything. It actually just was like, oh, this feels like I'm watching a Marvel show in terms of the quality of writing and the script.
Yeah.
In terms of the dialogue, I was like, oh, why is this dropped so badly downhill? I watched it with David while I was on my trip, and he's a big Tolkien fan too. And we both finished it and we were like, that was shit, hey? And he was like, that was terrible. And I was like, yeah, that was really bad. Because I thought episode 3 was fine. I was like, it's not as strong. Numenor was a little like visually stunning, but character-wise and the way they'd set up, I was like a little disappointed in it. It just felt a bit too like familiar and not how I imagined it exactly. And then episode 4 just dropped all the story. I felt like every storyline got fucking ruined.
Yeah.
And it didn't have any of the half-wits, which I thought for a set of characters that aren't, where this is all made up for the show, not a part of the Tolkien canon, I thought was such a great addition to the show. Like, to have the half-wits in there, to have the hobbits in there. It felt homely, and there's nothing really written about the hobbits back then, so make up what you want. It felt respectful. It felt like what it would have been like to be a hobbit back then, thousands of years before they'd settled in the show. I'm like, I can believe it. It still felt like Middle-earth. It still felt like Tolkien. Cool.
Yeah.
Then episode to episode just sort of was like, it never recovered. It never recovered. It had moments, and this is the thing about this whole show, and it's very much like the Hobbit movies, where it's like there's individual scenes and individual moments. I'm like, that's really good, but it's sandwiched between shit, shit writing, like, and just in general as a show, not even like as a lore Tolkien fan, like as just a quality show, it lacked a lot. The performances I thought were like, you have great actors. I thought the actors that played Galadriel, that played Elrond, that played Halbrand, I thought were great performances, but they had a lot of shitty dialogue. Mostly Galadriel. Poor girl, what a performance. I felt like when she was good, when she had good script writing, I was like, this feels like Cate Blanchett. This feels like the Galadriel we know in the films. But there were so many editing jumps with her. There were so many things I felt like we missed, so many unexplained motivations, that I just found it hard to root for a character that I wanted to root for as a Tolkien fan and a Lord of the Rings fan so bad.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't one of those people that's like, she can't be a warrior, Galadriel's politician, whatever. I'm like, no, who gives a fuck? She's lived for thousands of years. She's one of the great elves of all time. Let her rip and tear. Let her just fuck shit up. I'm all for it. But then when you don't write good storylines, good dialogue, and make her dumb, I'm like, mate, I struggle. I struggle with the show, and there was twists at the end. Like, I was totally fine, again, spoilers, with Halbrand being Sauron. I called it from the start. I knew it was. I watched every episode with fucking Harlan. And even when they said in the last episode, when they went to fucking, Gandalf, which this is so fucking furious about that. That's my, like, I can't watch the show anymore after that happened. But when they go to him, the cultists go, you're Sauron. Harlan goes, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. I said, no, Harlan, this is not who Sauron is. I was like, Halbrand is Sauron. He goes, I'm like, no. Just keep watching. I promise you Halbrand is Sauron. And he goes, how do you know? And I'm like, I knew 100% confirmed. As soon as Galadriel goes, he needs elvish medicine, I'm like, he's going to Eregion, which is where Sauron goes in disguise and forges the Rings of Power. And meanwhile, I knew Celebrimbor was literally about to start forging shit. So I'm like, okay, well, it's obviously, he has to be Sauron because this is what happens in the story. And I'm not complaining about it. I thought it was like, good. I like the way Halbrand was done. I thought he was a great character throughout the show. Again, it was only purely editing and writing that, like, had things that annoyed me. But I thought the twist, all that sort of stuff, was good. It made sense that he was Sauron. The twist was good. His performance was good. I had no real issue with the Sauron stuff with Halbrand. Galadriel and his interactions fucked me off. But the big thing that fucked me off was Gandalf. That was my biggest fuck off. Yeah. We'll get into it in detail. James, I want to hear your thoughts. Why didn't you like the show?
I thought the final episode was better than the show had been.
I agree.
I really liked the Harfoot stuff.
Yeah.
I did, obviously, I'm not a big Tolkien, person. So Gandalf wasn't a huge issue, for me.
I'll make it an issue for you.
Lore-wise, yeah, and that's fine. I'm completely happy with you doing that. But I did think, the issue with me is that the most of the plot points, right? So I don't give a shit about any of the characters. The only storyline I cared about was Harfoots by the end, because there felt like there was a bit of emotion there. I felt invested in it. I felt like I believed these characters, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. But Galadriel, Elrond, Durin, I just don't fucking care. The fucking guys in the Southland, what happened to, did they die? I guess they all died, right? I don't know. But I think there's just this, the show has this severe lack of cohesion, and none of the storylines seem to directly inform each other in a way that makes it worth watching them. And if you find yourself invested in one, the show doesn't give you a reason to be invested in another one, especially when the dialogue between scenes can often be so different. It almost feels like they had 5 writers sometimes working on episodes. There's so scenes, from scene to scene, it can just be completely different. and it feels so strange. I think, you know, there was, you know, I don't know, they wrote Halbrand in a particular way, and then it felt like all of a sudden they were like, let's make it really fucking obvious this guy is like some sort of sussy imposter.
Do you want to know? I was reading an interview with the showrunners, which was done after the show finished. So it was all spoilers. And they go, did the actor know he was playing Sauron the whole time? They're like, we didn't tell him until a few episodes. So you see that his performance will change. I'm like, they're talking about it like it's a brag, bro.
That's
and I'm
dumb.
Like, it's fucking
dumb.
Stupid.
That's not how characters work. He either needs to know from the start or never, you know? Like,
yeah.
You don't just tell him midway through and go, right, now change your performance. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, so just letting you know you're Sauron. And he's like, oh shit, well, I've not done
because you notice, like, it's like episode 6, probably. It's like 5 or 6. You start to see, like, he just becomes a bit evil. Like, everything he says to, like, Galadriel, he's, like, staring her in the eyes. He's like, I'm Sauron. Like, he's trying to tell her he's Sauron, like, without saying it out loud.
I mean, I thought I was like, if Sauron's a secret and we met all the characters by like the second episode, I was like, it's probably going to be this dude on the on the ship, and it's only because he's with Galadriel and they're going to Numenor, because two major places Sauron goes, Numenor, which he will go back to, or should go back to based on what's going to happen in Numenor, but they might totally fuck that too. So who knows? Numenor and Eregion, they're the two key places in the Silmarillion and in Tolkien canon that Sauron goes to. One, to Eregion to help forge the Rings of Power, being the Dwarven Rings and the Rings for Men, does not get involved in the Elven Rings, but they're done last at the end, but not in the show because they're done first, and he was involved in them. Okay, all right, fine, whatever. The least of my concerns, to be honest. But I just sort of knew, I'm like, okay. And when they got to Numenor and he could fight and he had the gift of the gab, you know, could talk. Was like straight away super confident talking. I'm like, this dude's fucking Sauron.
Yeah.
Because this is, I know Sauron at this stage in the Second Age, for a lot of it, he's in disguise, different disguises. Was never called Halbrand or a man, but I'm like, they're not going to do it with the show. They'd obviously change it up, so even book readers aren't going to be 100% sure. But it's totally, that to me is a fine change to canon, right? You don't have to make him the same disguises. Have him be a different disguise. That's totally fair. That's something that makes sense, because it's still in keeping with the main concept behind what Sauron would do, why he would do it, and the motivations to manipulate and take power. Fine. I'm not sitting here as a fucking book purist. It has to be word for word the same. But then there's jumps of like, what? Like, why? This is not clever. Like, the twist they did with the stranger throughout this show was so stupid, because they made him so, like, all the hints were evil, and then like, no, that's just a red herring. Then I'm like, no, that's you establishing like clear ideas of what evil is, and then being like, but we're just going to do that because we want to be clever. Yeah. I don't think it's clever, like, to have not reward people for paying attention.
Yeah, because it's like, if you are paying attention, the only thing you could possibly infer is that he must be evil, right?
Dude, I thought he was a Balrog.
Yeah, you said that
I was so sure he was a Balrog because of all the uses of fire. When he landed in a fucking meteor, which is certainly not how any of the wizards came to Middle-earth. And when Nori touched the fire, it was cold. Didn't burn her. And what did Galadriel say in episode 1 is their torches weren't giving off heat because it was so evil, it doesn't give off any heat. So I'm like, okay, evil.
Yeah.
Killing fireflies, doing bad shit. He's probably going to turn out to be... I didn't think he was going to be Sauron. I was like, Halbrand. I knew Halbrand was Sauron. I was like, that's that. He's not Sauron, but he'll be something else. He'll be a Mire of some kind, probably a Balrog that could change shape. And then... Yeah, but then to make him... So Gandalf, James, does... Let's talk about this, because I just need to get this off my chest. Yeah. So Gandalf and all the wizards, they don't come to Middle-earth until the Third Age. Not for a minute, not for an hour, not for a day. Third Age. As in, after Sauron's defeated, after Isildur chops off the finger of Sauron and takes the ring from him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of the Second Age, when the last alliance of men and elves defeat Sauron. That's the end.
Mm-hmm.
The wizards come after, and 3,000 years of history go by until the Lord of the Rings occurs. 3,000 years, and in that time, Saruman, the two blue wizards, Radagast the brown, Gandalf the white, are sent by the Valar from Valinor to Middle-earth with different jobs, different tasks. And Gandalf, being the most important of all the wizards in the Tolkien Legendarium, again, not for an hour, not for a minute, not for a second is he in Middle-earth in the Second Age. And why is that important? Well, you can look at the books, but let's look at the movies. And I want to look at the movies because, if nothing else, this show just needs to fit so you could watch the shows, watch The Hobbit, watch The Lord of the Rings, and they'd all fit nicely. They're all this universe of Middle-earth on for screen. Make it at least make sense there, and I'll let you have a pass. But James, now you're telling me that in The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf was around before the rings were forged. Gandalf was around for a history that in the Fellowship of the Ring, he travels from the Shire to Minas Tirith to read about.
I didn't even think about that. That's so fucking funny.
He reads the account of Isildur and the finding of the One Ring.
Wow.
But you're telling me he was around for it.
That's hilarious.
Now, I get that Gandalf is well-versed, well-read, knows his history, knows a lot of people that were around then, like Elrond, like Galadriel. He's a part of the White Council. Gandalf's a very smart person. But I'll tell you what he doesn't know about fully. He doesn't know the full account of Isildur and the One Ring and all those details. You know why? Because he wasn't fucking there.
Yeah.
But Tyler, he's going into the East. He wasn't there. But he was, though. Because you're talking about the most important event in history of that world happening. And he was alive and in that world for it, is what you're telling me. He would have heard about it. He would have a better knowledge. And for someone of his role within the world, would have made it a point to know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that's just movie talk. I'm not going into book white fucks with that. I'm just movie talk. It doesn't make sense.
Is it possible it's not Gandalf?
I guess so, other than the fact he said an exact line from the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, he did? Which line?
Yeah. So, you know the whole always follow your nose line?
Oh, that is from...
That's from when they're in Moria and Gandalf's like, I have no memory of this place. And they're sitting there waiting for him. And then he's like, oh, it's this way. And they're like, oh, Mary goes, he's remembered. He's like, no, the smell's just not so foul down here. And then does the whole line of like, always follow your nose. It's the exact line.
See, I didn't know if that was Elva was like, I think that's a reference. And I was like, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But I guess she was right.
It's an exact line from the Fellowship of the Ring that Gandalf says. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah. Well, also, it's
and
very,
Saruman is, for those who think like Saruman was a good guy and then turned evil, no, Saruman was always a bit of a cunt.
Yeah.
Like, him going bad was not a shock. Like, you read about Sauron, his history, always a jealous cunt. Especially of Gandalf. Super jealous of Gandalf.
Yeah.
So, it's not him. Otherwise, that's not Saruman's character.
Yeah.
Where he was a really nice guy to fucking hobbits. When the dude was happy for like... Yeah, Saruman fucking hated the hobbits. Hated them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, at the end of Return of the King, fucking... After Isengard falls and Sauron's defeated, fucking tries to kill them all. Goes to the Shire and attacks it. That's in the books, though, not in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
But...
I think as well, it's pretty clear what they're doing with the stranger character, because it's like thematically in the show, it's obviously Gandalf, right? Like it might not make sense, but like thematically, it's like, yeah, that like it can't be anyone else, right? Like it's very clear that they're trying to be like, no, this is Gandalf, because like he's a good guy, like he's he's using all this, the magic just feels very Gandalf-y. I don't know, he's like all of it. And as well, the thing that I thought was fucking funny is like for this whole show, he's like a dumb fucking idiot, right? Who like is dropping his apple and he's like, bloody hell, my apple. It's gone halfway across the forest. on its own, and then like he has this moment where like he uses the staff.
He's like awakens his powers,
and then all of a sudden he's like, I am really just well versed. I can speak like the most wisest person you've ever known. I got a fucking accent now. I sound all British. I sound great. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like there was no arc or like development or anything. It was just, I'm dumb, and now I use a magic staff, and now my character arc happened in like snap of your fingers. And it's like, that's kind of just, that's boring. That's not interesting, because then it's just like, oh yeah, so what was the point? What was the point? Like, he could have just showed up. You could have started, like, I don't know. I guess you need like Nori to have her arc and stuff, like to become more. But she starts the exact way she ends. The only thing that changes is the rest of the Harfoots go, yeah, you know what? You probably were right. Like, you can go off with the strange man, I guess. But like, if you'd have just like you could have done that differently and cut out this whole pointless thing where this man just doesn't know who he is. But I guess they just wanted to like throw you off and be like, oh, who is he? Who do you think he is? For like a whole season to like keep you watching, really, more than anything. Because it's not a satisfying conclusion to any sort of arc or character development for either of the characters. Because Nori's just gone from, I really think that as Harfoots we should be doing more, to, yep, I feel the same way still, but now my family agrees with me and have let me go off with a backpack. And like that's it. Yeah. And then the only thing that's happened with the stranger is I sent out a bunch of mixed signals. None of it makes any fucking sense. And now I just am a cool wizard guy, and we're gonna go off together and explore. And it's like, that could have been the start of the season. Like, they could have been done in like 2 episodes. Like, why'd that stretch out to the length of the season? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it felt like this whole season was like set up. It was like literally a setup season. Yeah. And it felt like they were just trying to get a bunch of puzzle pieces in place to do the second season. Mm-hmm. Like, I personally have a feeling the second season will be significantly better than this, but that's not saying a lot. True though. True. No, you're not wrong. Look, and in terms of, you asked, could it be other wizards? Like, maybe it's one of the 2 blue wizards. It's known, and Saruman included, they spent 1,000 years in the east, which is where they're going. Mm-hmm. Right? But it's not, though, is it? Because it's definitely Gandalf.
Yeah.
For many reasons, and one key one being that the first people he meets are fucking hobbits, and that's why he has such a special relationship with the hobbits. And you know what? If that was the origin story of Gandalf, I love that, other than the fact that it didn't happen then.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen then. Yeah. It was like 1,000 years into the Third Age before the wizards fucking showed up.
And that's a lot of years as well. It's not just like a little bit of time. That's a lot of time.
Fuckload.
It's almost as bad as like showing. It's worse than showing the pyramids being built in the Odyssey DLC.
Like it is worse. I think it's worse because this is real.
Yeah.
So
because this is real.
This is real.
Yeah.
I take this lore as serious as real history, personally. Mm-hmm. In fact, more so. More important to me than real history.
True.
Your talk, like, I get that with the show, this is covering thousands of years of history. The Second Age is a long, long time. And it's covering a lot of ground here. Numenor, all the shit going on there. With, you know, you've got some Game of Thrones shit going on where one faction doesn't want the old ways, the elves doesn't want anything to do with that sort of got them there, and the faith of the Valar, where you've got this other section that's like, we want the power, we're the superior beings, fuck the elves off, we're Numenorians, we're the best, leads to their downfall. Like, there's different sides of that. I get that they're trying to fit all that in and where that'll go. All the rings of power being forged, the Eregion stuff, Celebrimbor, Elrond. There's a lot of ground to cover that it takes place really over thousands of years, and they're putting it into one show. I get that they have to do that. Again, I can deal with that if your writing's good, but it's just not. Like, Elrond is probably the best character of the show in terms of performance, and writing's not the worst. But again, there's just these weird gaps, like you said, where you just feel like you're missing stuff. And I loved the storyline with him and Durin. Like, they were probably my two favorite characters, and their relationship was really good. And the performances of like the actor that plays Durin was so good. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought he was probably the best performance of the show. I loved the way the dwarves were done. But again, the whole like Silmaril, like Light of the Silmaril being like what went into a tree that then caused, that's what Mithril comes from, is a bit like, I'm like, why are you trying to explain things that don't need to be explained and make shit up in Tolkien lore? Like, you don't need to explain where Mithril came from.
Yeah.
Because it's a mystery. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like this big, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's already such an important thing in the world. It doesn't have to have this moment that is like, there you go, book fans, we mentioned fucking Silmarils. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't have to. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to do it. I love the way they did in like the second episode when you first meet Celebrimbor, and he has Fëanor, his grandfather Fëanor's hammer, the creator of the Silmarils, one of the great elves of all time. Like, love little references like that it just mentions, because it's not a part of the story, so we don't need to focus on it. But then they're like trying to make shit a part of the story that aren't true to canon as well, just cause. And I'm like, why are you trying to do this? Why are you trying to force shit? And I felt like a lot was being forced, and I think the biggest victim of that was probably Galadriel's character, because I tried to get her motivation why she's so driven to chase Sauron, and I'm totally fine with like Galadriel and Sauron crossing paths in this way, and like her making a mistake. It's totally fair. Like, there's a lot of stuff known about Sauron's opinion of her and their opposition to each other, and even, you know, Galadriel rejecting the offer to take the ring in the Fellowship of the Ring, and her sort of passing that test. That's a big deal for Galadriel, and it did feel like there was a lot of weight and backstory and feelings she has towards that. I'm fine with that, but I'm not seeing the development happen, because she's just so sure of herself the whole time, and she keeps making fucking mistakes, and then you don't feel like she's really growing from it yet. Mm-hmm. And then she makes this biggest mistake of them all, is fucking helping Sauron get to this powerful position again. And she doesn't tell anyone she's fucked up.
Yeah.
Why? In fact, I'll tell you what I thought was happening, because I was like, do you know how ridiculous it is that she's not telling anyone at Sauron? We need to stop. Don't make these fucking rings. You know? Like, don't make the rings, because that's what fucking, you know, Sauron was telling you to do. Well, at first I think he was... They don't say who came up with the crown idea. Celebrimbor was the one that said it. You assume maybe it came from Halbrand, which is a nice reference, because it's Sauron's master Morgoth that had the 3 Silmarils in a crown that he would wear. So it makes sense to make it a crown that Sauron would obviously want to steal. I like that. That's a nice little... Again, there's nice little things that are in there surrounded by shit. And then Galadriel's like, we need to make 3 rings. Oh, you need more rings? Like, I would think Galadriel would be opposed to this whole situation. We've found Sauron. We know what the cause of this fucking evil is. Let's deal with him.
Yeah. And
that might actually be the cure for it. It's his coming that's the reason this sickness is coming over the elves. But instead she's like, let's forge 3 rings. Do you know what I thought in that moment? I was like, because obviously Galadriel woke up and Sauron's gone. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh shit. And I said to Harlan, I was like, dude, this is a good twist. That's not Galadriel. Sauron's in disguise. He's put her somewhere else, and now and I was like, what a great twist. And then it's like, no, it's actually Galadriel being a dumb cunt.
It just doesn't make
sense. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I thought it made sense for a second. I'm like, what a great twist. Oh no, it actually just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Sauron just left. He just left.
He just walked away, apparently. Like,
after she found out.
Because they do, like,
but he's in Mordor, though. Mount Doom, bro.
Oh, true.
You know?
I do recognize that.
They haven't forged the 7 dwarven rings, the 9 rings for men yet, which should already be done. Technically, if the elven rings have been done, because they know not to do business with Halbrand again. That's what Galadriel said. So you assume Halbrand's going to come back in another disguise to do the other rings.
He's going to do it again.
He's going to do it again.
He's going to trick her again. And she's going to be like, don't worry.
Because maybe they could have fixed it if Galadriel had just told them that it's Sauron.
Yeah,
but they're like, well, we can't have it. We can't have it tell them it's Sauron because he's got to come back as another disguise because we sort of didn't get them to do the dwarf rings yet or the male rings yet. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why she's done. Yeah. And it's like she's so good. Galadriel's one of my favorite fucking characters in all of the books. She's so fucking important.
Yeah.
And the actress that's playing her in this is so good at playing her. But the writing's so bad.
Yeah.
The writing's so bad.
It's what do you think about the whole the death fake out with Isildur? Because he's apparently dead now.
I mean, it's an eye roll because obviously he's not.
Yeah, it's like it is just like a Disney Plus Star Wars moment.
Feels,
like,
doesn't it?
Is
It
Isildur like... from The Lord of the Rings dead? I wonder. No, obviously fucking not. It's so dumb. Yes. Like I thought they'd reveal it pretty straight away. Like they would do like it's obviously like weighing on his father, like some emotional torment, and then he finds him again, and it's cool. But like they just left it. They were just like, nope, we want you to just think he's dead. It's like, who's watching this show? Like people that haven't seen Lord of the Rings, I guess, and just don't know who that character is. But then, like, do you even give a shit about that character anyway? Because it's not written in a way that's like
there's people
super
that
compelling
love
anyway.
This show, but it's like there's like 15-year-old chicks. I feel like are the other people that must like the same people that like fucking She-Hulk. You know what I mean?
God.
Like that's what it feels like to me when I go on Twitter. I'm like, I've had to like. I was following a lot of these talking pages. I'm like, I need to turn this off because these people are fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Not the Tolkien pages, but just people like a lot of people actually think this is just a great show. Yeah. And I'm like, how? It's not even as a Tolkien purist, just as like a show.
I think people...
It's not great.
In this...
Like it's not like there's worse shows out there. Like there is worse shows out there. Yeah. But it's just... It's like a $1 billion show. It should be fucking better. I'd rather watch Obi-Wan.
God, fucking hell. No way.
I liked Obi-Wan. Fuck you.
Obi-Wan was written so much worse than this show. So much worse. Holy fuck.
Yeah, but Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, I'll take it. I'll take it any day.
Hey, look, when I watch Lord of the Rings, I get to see Mordor. I recognize that one. So yeah. When Mount Doom erupted, I was pogging at my television.
Oh, I remember. Oh god. Oh, when the Mount Doom eruption, fucking, that's also dumb. The whole thing, the Southlands being more. I was like, I guess so.
I didn't hate it. I mean, obviously, I'm not a lore guy, but I did think it was funny.
It's
at the end.
It's not in there, but it's also just feels like I'm like, what? Like, I just felt like they did a bunch of things to set up what. I reckon you could probably go into season 2 for the most part, not every storyline, but for the most part, you could go into season 2, episode 1 and be like, this could have been episode 1 of season 1.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like there's a lot of things, like, you don't need to do this. They're doing it to feel like they're clever. Like, that's what the Mordor stuff felt like to me. I'm like, you're trying to, like, trick us and shock us. Like, no, I saw all of this coming.
Yeah, like you can see it on the
when
map.
They're like, what's this sword go into? And I'm like, well, we know Southlands is Mordor, so the volcano's going to erupt at some point.
Yeah. It's one of those things. And I do think it was funny at the end of that episode where the guy is like, oh, bloody king of the Southlands or whatever. And he's like, no, this needs a new name. And it's like, okay. Yeah.
I was waiting. I'm like, if this cunt says Mordor, I'm going to flip
that was like, when after I watched the episode, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take it because he didn't say it out loud, you know? Like, they did it with text. I'm like, if he said it out loud, that would have been so fucking stupid.
I literally was like, that's such a, like,
yeah. It feels like, honestly, it feels like a show made for people that don't know Lord of the Rings, but, like, they know it enough where they're like...
They're not just the books, the movies as well.
Yeah, it's like, you know... It's like people that have maybe watched the movies once and they're like, oh, I recognize Mordor, that's cool, but they couldn't point to it on a map, so they don't realize that the Southlands is obviously Mordor until Mount Doom erupts, because like they don't realize where Mordor is, even though, I mean, you do see it on maps in the movies, but like You know what I mean? And like they're like, oh, I know Gandalf and Harfoots. They're like the hobbits and stuff.
Yeah,
like
it does. It feels like
it's a lot of like point at the thing you know, and then just ignore the writing being bad, and it just kind of.
The one thing
sucks.
I'll give this. The one thing I'll give this show, and I appreciate about the show, is how much it's got me rereading Tolkien books. And
That's good.
Because I've just was excited and just be like, I love Middle Earth. It's my favorite fictional universe, my favorite films of all time, my favorite book series of all time. There's a bunch of like extended universe books that are all published post-mortem of Tolkien that I haven't read. Like a lot, Beren Luthien, Fall of Gondolin, like I haven't read those books. They're like 200, 300 page books. They're all chapters within this and storylines within the Silmarillion. So I know the stories, but they're like the bigger versions, and I've never read Unfinished Tales. I've got that. So like I'm getting back into Tolkien. So I'll give the show this. It's sort of brought it to top of mind again. Yes, it's time to get into these books, but fuck the show. Yeah. With the greatest respect. And yeah, honestly, man, there's just so many things that were just frustrating me. And it just felt like it was so... They weren't twists, but they were supposed to be twists. They were fan service for the sake of fan service, and I just didn't vibe with it.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like it respected even a movie fan, like a hardcore movie fan, or let alone book fans. And yeah, it was just really... bummed me out, dude. It just really bummed me out.
Ending season 1, I'm thinking to myself, like, do I want to see more? And the answer is probably no. So, like, will I watch season 2?
I'm gonna suffer through this fucking show for the next 5 years.
I'm not doing it. I'm so over it. And I think as well...
I don't have a choice. I don't even have a choice. I just have to suffer through it.
I think what was, like, very telling is last night I watched The Rings of Power, and then straight away after it, I watched House of the Dragon.
Oh, dude.
And it was just like, it's night and day.
It's not fair because they're totally different fantasy shows. One's high fantasy, one's just,
of course.
Not high fantasy.
But just writing
but also,
character, like, depth.
Dude,
like,
House of the Dragon is fucking bullshit how good it is.
It's incredible.
We finished the episode last night. It was with Jared, Tyr, and Tristan, my friends. Mm-hmm. 4 of us out there, the credits roll. And I turned to Jared, I said, I can't believe how good this show is. Like, and everyone goes, right? And it's in the sense of like, Game of Thrones ended so shit. Those last couple of seasons were rough.
Yeah.
And when they're like, there's a spin-off coming and the trailers are coming, everyone's sort of like, oh, I don't know, like... It ain't so bad. I've got a bad taste in my mouth. Will it be as good as the original show? Probably not. So, like, do we really want it? And then we're watching it. You're 9 episodes in now. We're heading to the season finale next week. And I'm like, this is better than Game of Thrones was.
It's insane. It's
like so good.
End of that episode.
It gets better. Every week's better than the previous
single episode
week.
It just like, it somehow gets better. And I realized end of that episode, I was like so tense. Like I was tensing my muscles like that whole episode. It was it was so fucking intense. Just like the way that it was like written was just incredible. Like, and I think one of the core things about House of the Dragon that's so good, and obviously we don't want to spoil anything here. We'll talk about it, properly on the next episode when we do like
next
the whole
week
season.
After the finale.
But there are characters that show up like episode 8, episode 9, like later in the season that you don't spend a great deal of time with, that weren't even in the beginning, because there's so many time jumps, and you haven't had time to flesh those characters out. But there is, the writers have such like a rounded idea of who every single character is, so that even if a character shows up for the first time, you get this perfect sense of like who they are, like their wants, their desires, their dreams, their insecurities, everything, all of these personality traits. And sometimes it can be conveyed through just like a look or a line of dialogue. It's fucking phenomenal. And coming out of Rings of Power and then going into it, it's just night and day between like the character writing. It's insane.
Oh, dude. One of my least favorite scenes from the finale though was this Council of Elves scene between High King Gil-galad, Celebrimbor, Elrond, and Galadriel. And they're all talking about what they should forge and how to save the elves and all this shit. And dude, the scene was just this weird exposition to get us to a point where they're gonna forge some rings.
Yeah.
But it was so fucking weird.
It's so
like,
stiff, yeah.
The elves are in trouble. They've got mithril. They need to forge something. We need the light. We need it to be a ring shape, like a crown. Like,
it's got to be round and circular, I think, perhaps, in the Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings show.
Yeah, it just felt so like
it's like, are they gonna forge a ring in the Lord of the Rings? I don't know.
It was just rough.
And they're like, oh, we'll make it a crown. Like, no, you won't. You won't make it a crown, will you?
A big character in like the legendarium of Tolkien. And he's such a cuck in this show as well. He's such a cuck in this show. And his outfit's terrible. The costumes. The elves having all short hair. At first I was letting it go, but the longer it goes, pisses me the fuck off.
Yeah.
These elves with the short hair and shit. And like, there were moments where they nailed Galadriel and I was like, yes, this is Galadriel. And then there was like, they fuck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Galadriel is like one of the most important, I've said this multiple times in this podcast, one of the most important figures in Middle-earth, but also one of the most important elves in terms of the lineage she comes from, how long she's been around for and alive for, her importance within the world, and her power as well. She should walk into a room and everyone, without even looking, should feel her presence. Mm-hmm. When she goes on the ship in Numenor and they're all going to leave and they're all looking at her, that and her theme's playing, I'm like, that's Galadriel. Everyone should stop and fucking look. Mm-hmm. Because that's what she does to a room. Look at Lothlorien in the Fellowship of the Ring. She's literally glowing when she walks around because elves are higher beings. And all the elves in those Lord of the Rings films, they had auras about them that they did. They had like this light shine up. Like there's an aura to elves. Mm-hmm. And that's super important, and especially to an elf like Galadriel. And then there's moments when she's bowing to this blind fucking dumb queen from Numenor. And I'm like, stand the fuck up, Galadriel.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't the moment to have your character development. Fuck this bitch off. She doesn't know anything. Like, remember the scene of the tower when she finds, like, Galadriel infiltrates a tower to find the dying king, and then the queen's there, and then she's like, I'm so sorry, and then they all, like, are in agreement now. Like, there's just so many jump points to, like, we know where we want to get to, but we don't know how to get there, so this happens, and then they agree to go here next because we need it to go here next. Yeah. Without it making any sense. And you know when Galadriel was talking about her husband, Celeborn? Mm-hmm. I had a husband. And I'm like, what? There's me sitting there like, what? Yeah. First of all, Galadriel does have a husband. Husband's in the Lord of the Rings. I tell you where he's not dead. He's certainly not dead. Certainly not dead. In fact, they have a child. Do you want to know who the child is?
Yes.
Elrond's wife.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
interesting.
Arwen, Aragorn's wife, Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Galadriel's her grandmother on her mother's side.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, but that is the case. In this show, Celeborn's just not around. Galadriel doesn't have a kid. Elrond isn't married to her, hasn't met her. Already weird. And then Galadriel mentions her husband and that he's not around. That's the last I saw of him. I was like, excuse me?
Weird.
Where the fuck's Celeborn, bruh? Why is he gone? And obviously, they'll explain it later. I guess so. I'm sure. I mean, he's obviously not dead the same way Isildur's not dead.
Yeah.
Because, like, and the memes that came out of that were fucking hilarious. Because the only line he has in The Lord of the Rings is, "Where is Gandalf? For I much desire to see him." And it was just like, all the memes were, "Where is Celeborn? For I much desire to see me."
Oh, that's good.
It's like, where the fuck is he? He's also a super important elf. Bit of a cunt too sometimes, to be fair. But like, you know, important figure. I don't know. There's just like, I'm just so confused about what this show has to really do. Like, what was the... I read the chapter in the Silmarillion, Beren and Luthien. It's about a 35-page chapter. It is so fucking good. It's my favorite chapter in the whole book. It is so outrageously good. So much happens in that chapter. It is a huge condensed story that sort of fits into the overarching first age stories that are told throughout the Silmarillion. It's amazing. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, this one chapter is got enough substance in it, enough juice in it. That it's its own 200, 300-page book that you can read. But also, I want to see the movie. Like, I want to see this movie. I want to make this movie because it is fantastic. It would be amazing. You could stay true to the lore, to the canon, to the story, and make an incredible film with it that's set in Middle Earth. It'd be amazing. So if I was to hear someone's making a Beren Luthien, I'm like, fuck yeah. Because what's the point in doing it? Well, you want to take this great story to screen. What I'm confused here, James, is I don't know the point.
Yeah.
If they're Tolkien fans of what they're trying to do with the show.
Yeah.
Because it's not saying true. Like, what have they read in Tolkien's world that they're like, we want to bring... They're not bringing anything of this to the screen. They're making up their own shit for the sake of it. So it's hard for me to not say this is purely just some bullshit Amazon money grab.
Yeah. Well, that's how it comes across. For sure.
We want to make our own Game of Thrones. We want to make our own show. And now I know they spent $1 billion, so it's hardly a money grab. I know they've put a lot into it in terms of finances, risk, reward, all this sort of shit. But they're wanting a big return on it. They're wanting their show to be the big show.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting from it. So I'm like, so it's a business move. It's not we saw a Tolkien story, we love Tolkien the same way Peter Jackson loves Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
The same way the creators and the production on this show asked Peter Jackson to be a part of it. He said yes because they wanted him to be involved in the script, and then they didn't send him a script because I bet they thought he would say no. And then when because they're going to be like, people will be like, did you ask Peter Jackson to help? And they'd be like, we did, and he said no. But cunt, he said yes. And you guys are like, shit.
Yeah.
Now we have to fucking involve him. They're like, we're not involving him. Because he'll say we need to change things. Because it's not fitting Tolkien and we can't do it. Apparently they went through quite a few Tolkien experts, fired a few people.
Interesting.
I heard. That might be bullshit. But I heard that people disagreed and they just got rid of them.
Yeah.
I don't know, bro.
It's a weird one.
Look, I just don't understand the purpose of the show.
I don't either. Anymore. It doesn't feel like it gives me the same vibes almost as The Hobbit, but in a different way. And that when you watch The Hobbit, it's retelling the story of The Hobbit, but it's also trying to be a Lord of the Rings prequel. And this show feels like, more than anything, it's trying to just point out things that are in Lord of the Rings and go, look, that came from this, and the story isn't very good, that, explains it.
The Hobbit's better than this. The Hobbit's better than this. The Hobbit's better than this. Maybe not the Battle of Five Armies. Those first two movies are way better than this bullshit.
Maybe. I thought The Hobbit was pretty... Yeah. Maybe I have to rewatch it. I mean, I liked it when I watched it.
Trust me. Rewatch it.
I think a lot of this is just trying to explain things that are in Lord of the Rings and sort of give people a high. I think they've probably seen what the most successful franchises do, and they're trying to replicate that. It's like, let's try and have our own Game of Thrones, but also look at what Marvel does. Like, they just throw in cameos and they just do this and they just do that.
We need
and
Gandalf,
look at Star Wars,
we
so
need
it's like,
Sauron.
we got to throw in all the big names, those locations. Like, how did Mordor happen? Like, we need to tell you. Because people will just be pogging and doing reaction videos online about, the reaction to the creation of Mordor and, all of this stuff. I think it feels very calculated. It feels very like it's made by an algorithm. And
it does. It feels made by an algorithm.
Yeah, it's very Disney. Very.
That can be the title of this podcast, Made by an Algorithm.
The Rings of Power was made by an algorithm. With proof.
Yeah. With proof.
But yeah, it sucks because there's some parts of the show that are good, but overall it just leaves me not wanting any more.
There are scenes, there are moments that are really good. Again, I thought the Halbrand Sauron stuff was actually relatively pretty well done. Other than editing jumps and logic jumps, the Halbrand performance, the character overall, his goals and ambitions, I thought it was decent, and I liked the twist at the end. I really liked the dream sequence with Galadriel. I loved that. In fact, I thought it was a really fucking good scene. I loved the first 2 episodes. Loved them a lot. That prologue, the first 7 minutes of the Rings of Power, adore it. Tremendous. Soundtrack, out of this world good. I thought Ben McCreary did an incredible job with the soundtrack. I loved the Harfoots. I loved learning about them. And that's an addition, not book related at all. And I loved it. It felt like the Hobbits. It felt like the one episode they weren't in. It was my least favorite episode. They felt like the heart and soul of it, the same way they do in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. I just really enjoyed that side of it and all the characters there and the community. Like it was feel good stuff. Mm-hmm. I loved the Elrond Durin stuff. In fact, I loved most of the Durin stuff. I thought, he's a really great character. I loved Elrond for the most part. But I hated Celebrimbor. I hated Gil-galad. Galadriel I want to love, and I just struggle sometimes because she has great scenes, great moments. I'm like, fuck yeah, that's Galadriel. And then they'll just logic jump her and have her not, like, fuck up and then not fix it. Mm-hmm. Like, that whole not telling them he's Sauron is just beyond words retarded.
Yeah.
We need to make 3. Why?
Well, because there were 3
Where does that come from?
Rings.
Well, yeah, exactly. There's 3 in the Lord of the Rings. That was like, there was no reason for it.
Yeah. Well, it creates balance, you see.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I got to use my brother's dagger because, I don't know, it's meaningful, I guess. Like,
I've got to let that go.
And he's going to be the one that sort of, in a way, roundabout way, creates the rings. And I don't know what that means or, like, the meaning behind that symbolism, really. Yeah. Like, is it that his goal was to defeat Sauron, and so by using his dagger to forge the rings, there'll be a new weapon that the elves can use to stay in Middle-earth to defeat Sauron? I don't know. Maybe that's what they're trying to do there.
And then you've got Isildur's made-up sister that has no purpose in the show.
Oh yeah, she had like one scene, and they never. She had like a scene with the king, and then it cuts.
She's the last one to see the king alive, and then she goes down to see the Palantir.
Yeah, and then she pulls the thing off, and then it cuts, and she's not in the episode again. So that'll be in season 2.
Yeah,
we'll see what happened to her with the.
But like, what was the point? What? I don't even understand what her motivation is, because her brothers and her father, Isildur and her father are like helping the elves, and she just seems to have this huge perspective, like to this dude that's got a crush on her. That's like, you can't let your father let them help the elves. She's just so anti-elf for some fucking reason that they haven't explained.
She's like crying.
I just don't understand. I'm like, who the fuck is she? Why doesn't she like the elves? I literally have no idea what's going on with her.
Yeah.
And she's also completely made up character, and and I just don't understand her whatsoever. Every scene she's in, I'm like, I don't get her. What's her motivation? Who is she? Why does she care? Mm-hmm. Why is she there?
Why is she?
Oh, she draws? I didn't even realize that. And she's like stupid.
Yeah, she draws. Important, I guess. I don't know.
I guess so.
Maybe it'll become useful.
I don't know what else to say, man. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, that's wow.
It's not like I've sat and ripped on it, and rightfully so. It deserves to be ripped on. 5 out of 10 is the rating I give it. Mm-hmm. 5 out of 10. I feel like it's a satisfying rating. Because there were some episodes that were 2s. The episode 4 is a 2 out of 10 episode. Mm-hmm. Episode 1, 8.5. Episode 2 is an 8. They were the 2 best.
Yeah.
The finale was still like a 6.5, 7. It was a better episode, but it just didn't land on a lot of storylines. And the Gandalf thing pissed me the fuck off. I was fuming. I literally got to Harlan before. I was like, if they make him Gandalf, dude, I can't watch the show anymore because they've just fucked it. And then they didn't, and I'm like, fuck, I'm still going to have to suffer through the show. I'm a liar.
Classic.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I can't wait till people get upset about this. I just thought it was a really good show. I'm not a book fan. I just like to enjoy things.
Most people, I think, don't agree, right? Like, I feel like most people think it's kind of just, like, kind of sucks.
I don't know.
I feel like it's a popular opinion. I'm not really sure.
No, I had someone at work tell me, "Oh, we really liked it today." And I was like,
but but the question is, do you like everything you watch? Probably.
Yeah, and then I asked her a few questions. I was like, "Do you though?" And then I was like, "How about this, and that?" And she's like, "Oh, well, okay, I can. Oh, yeah, like, yeah. No, I know."
See, that's it.
I haven't really thought about that, have you?
Yeah, people that like bad things, their brain just ain't working. Lights ain't on in there, you know. They watch the screen, kind of like you with Obi-Wan. Watch the lights on the screen. I mean,
let me enjoy the lights, James.
Yeah, the nice colorful lights.
Let me enjoy the lights.
Yeah. You know, it's difficult being this clever. You know, it's not easy.
It's tough.
It's a burden.
It's tough it's actually a burden, much like The Ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See, maybe that's like the message of the show. Is like watching the show simulates the experience of carrying the One Ring.
It's just a
to
fucking
the fires
burden.
of Mount Doom.
And it's an absolute burden.
That's what we have to do with the show. We have to take our fire stick to the fires of Mount Doom.
That's why it's called The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, because it's actually, if this is what is happening from Frodo's perspective in his brain.
He's watching
He's literally in his head, every minute, every second he's got the ring on, the show's playing. And he's like, make it stop.
He's like, wait, Gandalf wasn't in the Second Age? What's going on? I'm confused.
He'll be losing his mind. He's literally losing his mind. And also the fact that Nori, they just got an actress that looks like Elijah Wood to make a Frodo-looking fucking female hobbit is hilarious to me.
She's got the Elijah Wood eyes.
Yeah, she does. I'm fine with it. I love Nori. She's actually one of my...
Best character.
She's actually probably my favourite character of the show when you think about it.
The actress is really good too. She's great.
She's great. Unfortunately, she's with Gandalf, so that pisses me off. Anyway,
no, but you don't get it, Tyler. It's a really clever bait and switch. It's going to not be Gandalf. It's going to be a secret other fake. They're going to invent a new one. Actually, they're going to invent a new wizard.
I hope so. I hope they invent a new wizard.
It's going to be amazing.
I really hope they do. And then I hope we see him die.
Oh, God.
Anyway, that's all I fucking got to say on that, James. I don't
Wow.
know. Do you have any other closing comments?
No. I think it was one of the most mid shows I've ever seen.
It is one of the most mid shows of all time.
Honestly, it's a Marvel Disney Plus show dressed up with $1 billion.
It really... I'm so sad. I wanted it to be good so badly, James. You have no idea how much I wanted it to be good.
I know. I'm sorry.
No one wanted this show to be good more than I did. And I really you had people hating it before it even came out, and I was so pissed off at those fucking people that were review bombing. I was like, fuck off. You're not even Tolkien fans. You're just fucking right-wing cucks. Fucking virgin losers.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be good as a Tolkien fan, and at first it started so strong, I'm like, yes, let's go. I was so excited for a minute. They really fucking baited me. They had me.
They truly did. It sucks.
And then they deliver fucking She-Hulk with Lord of the Rings covered over it.
Oh, man.
No, you don't know. She-Hulk's actually one of the better Marvel shows on Disney Plus.
There's two scenes where there's good character writing. You just don't get it. We don't normally get that in Marvel shows, all right?
Yeah.
I got 3.5 minutes of good, so fuck off.
Dude, Matt Murdock's in it.
He's in it. He's amazing. She-Hulk. And you don't know this, but in the Daredevil Netflix show, he does make a joke once, so it's okay they turned him into a joke. It makes sense, actually. Fuck off.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the best depiction of Daredevil, personally.
Oh, you would. You would.
Even me that wanted to just joke around that I'm like, I will love the MCU Daredevil just to piss people off. Even I was like, I can't even run with the joke anymore.
It's like that obviously bad that you can't like it.
They didn't even let me run with the joke, the fucking assholes.
Oh my God.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, watching this episode of the AsAlways podcast. Yes. Let us know what you thought of the Rings of Power. I don't really care. Down in the comments below.
We read all your comments. We'll reply to everyone.
We read them.
We do.
Don't read them.
Leave your dreams.
On our Discord, if you're a patron, the AsAlways Discord, we have a Rings of Power discussion where most of us fucking hate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks to those great people that make the show happen over on patreon.com/AsAlways. Get in while you can. for the greatest podcast on the internet, the Clubhouse podcast. So thank you to everyone that supports us. We have Baron King, Damien the Not So Orange Gnome, Ferentino, Flash Product, Team Richard III, Ryan Hafer, Bullsack 47, Aragon, Kimber Gamer, Cream Pies, Hashtag Make the Nice Guys Too Please for the Love of Fuck Hollywood, Alfie Robert, Andrew, Big Dick 6669, Ben Higgins is thankful for sick brethren, Benedict Clobbers, BFHC, Biggest Fucking Virgin, Bodge, BQ Overlord, The Elder, Brian Ford, Call Me Daddy, Callum, aka I used to be Theftmas, but then I took an arrow to the knee, Christian0210, Connor Rosebill in the Alley, Disciple Alaric, Eli, Eurodito Hacker, Ethan Dean, Fishy, Furious Coco, Jean, Give Me a Penis, Kinker Swag, Gwen Hughes, Hamid the Weeb, Jack DG1998, Jane B. Bennett, Joe the Fan and Scarab, John Lang, Josh Duvillier, Josh J. Anderson, Joshua Moore, Liam, Loden, Lucas R05, Loomis, Jed Murray, 5080, Master Bass, Max H, Muddy Unicorn, Nick Miller, Oachkaward 7, our best and favourite mod, Brandy, Play the Rules, Radok, Grav, Just Son Bitch, Odu Doggo, Sparky Buck, Spell and Junk, The Blue Cow, Tom Welling, Simp, Tony, Walshy, and Zeppo. Thank you, Sweet Vince, for helping us power this podcast. We'll see you next week, next Sunday.
We will.
For back-to-back weeks of the As Always podcast where we delve into the whole of Season 1, full spoilers of House of the Dragon.
That's going to be a fun one.
Thank God. Thank God.
Thank the gods.
I'm actually looking forward to talking about that. Thank the 7. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See you later, everybody. Bye-bye.